Welcome back to the module on tools for collaboration. We're now going to take a look at something called circle practice, which is a form of meeting that really helps to bring diverse perspectives together and try to discover what it is that we could do that's more than the sum of the parts. So where no individual could have come to certain insights, how you can create conversation that really matters and leads to meaningful action. So for many years, human beings have gathered in circles around fires. It seems to be a very natural form that we fall into when we want to be talking to each other. And if you think about it, it's just a form where when you sit in a circle, everybody can see each other. You're aware of the different people who are there. There's a kind of openness and transparency to it. You're not sitting behind big square tables where you can't see the people sitting next to you. So in a very simple manner, it's a natural, organic form that helps people to be aware of everybody who's in the room. And here's an example of what a circle might look like in a bigger meeting where you've got a nice centerpiece. It's often good to have something at the center of the circle. It kind of focuses us on the center. And that's an important part of the circle practice, that we're looking at what is it that's at the center of this group that's really wanting to happen, to emerge out of this conversation. So it's not so much about my opinion or your opinion. We're really looking at it, what happens when we start to lean into a certain question together. So there's a few principles. It has been formalized in a way. You could say circle practice. People have come up with ideas for, well, if you follow these principles, then this will help the conversations to flow better. It relates a bit to some of the David Bohm dialogue work that we were looking at earlier as well. So some of the principles of circle. Rotating leadership among all circle members. So responsibility for making it happen, for hosting or facilitating the meeting in some way can be rotated between different members. So not everybody's always looking to one person to do that. Responsibility is shared for the quality of the experience. So everybody is encouraged to be accountable for the quality of the conversation. So to think about your own contribution. Is what you're going to say now really going to build on what's going on here? Or are you really listening to what's being said? If you're feeling that for some reason you're getting tired and the energy is dropping, then express that and name it, because probably other people are feeling the same thing. So encourage people to really all take responsibility for the quality of the experience and not just leave it in the hands of one person. And then the third one here, reliance on wholeness rather than on any personal agenda. So that comes back to this focus on the center of the circle. It's not so much on what you want to make happen or what somebody else wants to make happen, but what is it, if we've got a particular question that we're looking into as a circle that's related to a need in the organization, the question is, what's going to be most useful for the organization at this time? What's the greatest insight we can get to together as we lean into this question, build on each other's perspectives, and trust that different people will have different perspectives, will be bringing different information in. And when we allow all that information to be there, what's the pattern that emerges? What's the deeper insight we can get as we all lean into that together? So some of the practices that we would name if I was organizing a meeting like this, particularly, for example, in a business environment where people aren't used to meeting in these kind of ways, it's useful to be very explicit about these principles and these practices. And generally, people breathe a deep sigh of relief because it's just common sense, really. But most of the meetings that tend to happen, often in business contexts, are done in a very non-commonsensical way, in a way which doesn't really make the best out of the people who are in the room. So make some of these practices explicit. The first one here, speak with intention. So noting what has relevance to the conversation in the moment. So as you're listening to the conversation, really feel, when is the moment for me to say something? When is the moment for me to bring something in? Be very conscious of the impact that what you're going to say is going to have on the group. Maybe there's something which you want to discuss on this topic, but for the moment, people are busy exploring something else. well, allow that conversation to happen first before bringing in your point. Otherwise, you're going to disturb the flow and the development of the conversation at that moment. So it's just being really conscious about what's happening now and how can I best serve our collective inquiry through what I say. So speaking with intention. Listening with attention. Being respectful of the learning process of all members of the group. So listening with attention is really listening more deeply to the patterns in the conversation. Listening to the words which somebody says, but also the intention behind the words. So what is somebody really trying to get at? Listening with attention is about being curious, really wanting to know what somebody's trying to say, what somebody's trying to explain. So often in meetings, we're sitting there and we're kind of planning what it is we want to say, and we're not really listening to the other person. And so people say various things, but nobody really hears what they say, and then you say your thing, and nobody really hears what you say. And so we don't have a very constructive dialogue. So to be able to listen, to be really curious about what's this person's perspective, because that perspective will hold some truth. That perspective could have information that's useful for us. What are they really trying to mean? To be curious about what people are saying for the good of the group as a whole. So that's listening with attention. And then tending to the well-being of the group relates to what I said before. Really looking at how is it feeling at the moment in the room? Does it feel like people are energized and everything's going okay? Do we need to open a window? Do we need to take a break? Being aware, not just of having the facilitator be aware of it, but everybody pay attention to it. Is there anything I can do now that will enhance the experience of the group? Because that's what will generate the kind of impact that we need in terms of our collaboration and collective inquiry. So as we move on to look at some agreements that we might set within a circle. So let's move on to looking at some agreements that we might want to make explicitly when we're working in this kind of meeting practice. Again, it's particularly important to make these things explicit when you're in environments where people aren't necessarily used to meeting in this way. To write them up on a flip chart and have everybody kind of really check in. Can you sign up to this agreement? Can you agree that we're going to work in this way? Because once you've got people signed up to it, then you can also hold each other accountable for them and talk about why we're finding it hard or not to meet them. So here's a few agreements that in my experience have been very useful at helping us to maintain some of the principles that we just talked about. The first is listen without judgment. So as you're listening to somebody, bring that curiosity in. Slow down, in your impatience to maybe say what you have to say. Just notice that that's somebody's perspective. Don't notice if you yourself immediately have a judgment on it, that it's right or wrong. Just allow that to fade to the background and allow what somebody has to say to be there. So listening without judgment. Whatever is said in circle stays in circle. So that's part of a trust agreement, that unless we explicitly get permission for it, things that are said here stay here. So that allows us to be more vulnerable, to be more transparent and honest in the things that we have to say, if there's an agreement that it's all going to stay in the room. That, as I said, that doesn't mean that you can't take things outside, but the basic assumption is it stays here unless we ask permission and check with each other if it's okay to communicate more broadly what has been said. The third one, offer what you can and ask for what you need. So that's just about bringing in what you're able to bring in, and if there's something you need, ask for it. Don't just sit there thinking and getting grumpy because, I'm not getting this and nobody's really helping me out here. Ask for it and make, again, transparent what's needed and tend to your well-being and the well-being of the group. Because if you start to do that, other people will start to do that. And there you'll create, again, a basis of trust and relationship where people feel able to ask for what they need in that context. The fourth one, silence is also part of the conversation. And this is often a practice that people who are particularly in busy environments find very hard to accept. That sometimes in a conversation, it just falls still. And people start to get uneasy and then say something which isn't really useful or meaningful. Well, those silences can have a very important role. They allow all that's been said to kind of filter in, to drop into people's thinking, to settle down, to digest, and to see, okay, if all of that's been said, what might be the next step? So hold the silence, allow the silence to be there, give people permission to sit in silence for a bit, and then encourage them again to speak with intention when it's time to say something that we feel is going to contribute to the group as the whole. Then we can do it. But don't feel that we have to fill the silence with more words when maybe we just need to allow the silence to be there so that we can process everything that's been said so far. So the fifth one, we agree to employ a group guardian to watch our need, timing, and energy. So even though we're also encouraging everybody to take accountability, it's useful to have somebody just keeping track of time, because then everyone else can relax and go, okay, so I trust that, when we've only got 15 minutes left and we needed to get to some kind of outcome, that someone's going to call us on that. So if you want to do that, make that explicit with each other and say, okay, so-and-so is just going to keep a track of time, give us a warning 10 minutes out or whatever. And maybe we'll also be particularly have heightened awareness for the energy of the group and bring any sense that they have that something needs to change to our awareness so that we can make a difference. So those are just some of the basic principles for Circle. In my experience, particularly working in business environments, it's very powerful and a great relief to people to just sit in a circle, have no tables in between, to have these basic agreements, and then the really meaningful conversations start to happen. The kind of conversations that might happen partly around the coffee machine, but are never able to be given voice in the formal meetings, just simply because of the way they're structured and the culture that's there. So it's a way of introducing a more transformative, a more meaningful, a more innovative culture into an organization by starting to bring this kind of circle practice into the way people do things.